When I took the plane to Japan, I was so happy. I had a window seat, and during those 12 hours of flight, I was going to be able to see the sea, Kazakhstan, the big Chinese cities, and, well, no, I only saw snow. The plane made a big curved detour to the north. Why not fly directly in a straight line, or more logically, cut through the North Pole to go faster? By asking myself this question, I discovered many secrets about airplane trajectories. It's much more complicated than we think, and some areas are surprisingly avoided. For example, the Himalayas, the Pacific, the Parthenon, or even the Kaaba, the sacred place of Muslims. What do they have in common? You'll see behind scientific explanations and sometimes terrifying stories. Why do planes avoid the North Pole? Look at the route of an Alaska-Moscow flight. Doesn't anything shock you? There, if we are logical, it should cut directly through the North Pole. It would save thousands of kilometers of travel, like here for New York, Beijing. Except, as you might suspect, it's dangerous. Not because there's a risk of bumping into Santa Claus, but because there are three major fears for pilots there. First, the polar jet stream. Extremely powerful high-altitude winds that can cause significant turbulence and delays on the flight plan. Second danger, the malfunction of onboard instruments. We are at the magnetic north, and because of that, compasses, navigation devices tend to go crazy. Very difficult to navigate correctly. Finally, the third danger, solar radiation. At the pole, the Earth's magnetic and atmospheric shield protects much less from solar winds. So for you, a simple passenger, it's like having 4 chest x-rays. But think about the crew members who do this several times a month. In 2018, a Korean flight attendant affected by leukemia was the first to request recognition of a work-related accident after having crossed this ominous polar route for 6 years. Even if airlines avoid it, some still do it. Is it because they are big cheapskates who want to save money on your health and that of the crew? Not entirely. The real reason is that there is a big political problem in this area. During the Soviet era, no Western plane was allowed to fly over the territory. There was zero tolerance. A US-Korea flight made the mistake of slightly entering Russian airspace, and bam, instantly shot down. Before the 1950s, we couldn't pass through the North Pole either, because we didn't have the technologies to compensate for the magnetic anomalies we talked about. Fortunately, over time, with the end of the Cold War, Russia finally opens its airspace, but not at any price. Only one airline per country will be allowed to fly over Russian territory. As a result, for example, Air France is the only French airline that can serve Japan via Russia. Some don't even have the right. For example, Russia doesn't like Norway too much. Boom, forbidden to pass through. Europe intervenes in Ukraine. Boom, threat to close Russian airspace. If that happened, it would be a disaster. Going to Asia would take 3 hours longer, and ticket prices would increase by at least 150 euros. On the other hand, Russia charges very high fees for flying over its territory, more than 10,000 euros per flight and per plane, which makes the Siberian corridor probably the most profitable airspace in history. While editing the video, I realized that the United States was far from being the good guys in the story. They consider almost the entire Pacific Ocean as their property. They tax every plane that passes through. Even if the United States is on the other side of the world, you have to pay, just like that. Why do planes avoid the South Pole? So yes, it's still about snowy lands, but here, the problem is different. Already we suspect what's the point of going there, except maybe for a chilly Australia route, but otherwise on the map, there's not much going on. But above all, Antarctica is not an ice floe. It's a real continent with mountains covered in snow and extreme weather conditions. No one wants to fly there except for fun. In 1979, Air New Zealand said, let's do a few-hour tourist flight with people who can look at Antarctica from the window. Who's in? 2 hours of that. Worse that day, there was what is called a whiteout. You could see absolutely nothing. So much nothing that the pilots didn't see Mount Erebus standing in front of them. 250 people went straight into those 3,800 meters of rock. Can't see anything, refund? Why don't planes fly over the Himalayas? With what we've just said, not flying over the Himalayas seems like a rather logical decision, but it's more complicated than that. Already, as surprising as it may seem, there are airports in the mountains, like here, Courchevel Airport. Well, you still need to have some serious guts to land there. In the Himalayas, there's the famous Lukla Airport, which wins the award for being one of the most beautiful and one of the most dangerous in the world. A very short runway, sloped, with a cliff at the end. Suffice it to say, you shouldn't get your pilot's license there. But you'll tell me that the problem here, for a commercial airplane, is rather the height of the mountains. Except no, a plane flies at more than 10,000 meters. Mount Everest is at 8,848 meters. It's close, but there's a gap. To see the issue, let's do a little experiment. Grab your tickets. We're taking off for the Himalayas. All set? Are you settled in? Oops, I think I caused a depressurization problem. But don't panic, the pilot will manage. We can land on a runway in 40 minutes. Put on your oxygen mask, and don't worry, it's going to be fine. Well, almost. In planes, we only have 10 to 20 minutes of oxygen reserved. To be able to breathe again without assistance, the plane must descend to less than 3,000 meters, an altitude where oxygen is sufficient. And there, well, you'll really have to navigate between the mountain. Impossible to land on the mountain. Let's imagine your pilot manages it. He lands you in a nice powder that slows your fall. That's what happened on October 13th, 1972, when a Uruguayan plane crashed in the Andes at 3,600 meters altitude. The 45 passengers on board are a rugby team, as well as the players' family and friends. 1/3 will not survive the first day. Isolated and without food, the survivors learned through a radio that the search has been abandoned. The authorities estimated that the plane was white, making it indistinguishable in the snow, so it's hopeless. 1/3 will perish in the 2 months of waiting that followed. After 10 days of walking, 2 of the survivors finally meet a local farmer. 16 survivors were recovered who lived 2 months in the cold without food. Up there, human meat preserves quite well, and there was a lot available, so I'll let you imagine the rest. 33 years after the tragedy, a mountaineer went to the crash site and was able to recover the wallet of one of the survivors. A wallet he was able to return to its owner, with whom he became friends. A friend to whom you can ask, so is it true that it tastes like chicken? Why is your pilot making strange zigzags? Look at this flight plan. It's complete nonsense, we agree. It's just one of the records for the longest routes compared to the distance travel. Normally, a Jordan-Lebanon flight is 10 minutes. Here, it takes an hour and a half. In fact, pilots must avoid flying over Israel and Sinai, since these countries aren't exactly friendly with each other. It seems logical, but yes, planes do not fly over conflict zones. The craziest anecdote on this subject is the reason why we stay very far from North Korea. In 2017, above the Sea of Japan, an Air France Paris-Tokyo plane crossed paths with a North Korean nuclear ballistic missile. The missile was casually wandering next to the plane, and when I crossed it, it was like 5 minutes away. If you looked out the window, you saw the glow in the distance. There, we talked about countries, vast expanses, but flight restrictions can be imposed on much smaller areas. In fact, areas of a few meters that no one can fly over. The most iconic of these places is the most sacred site in Islam, the Holy Kaaba in Mecca. There would be a mystical reason, magnetic anomalies and gravitational disturbances that would drive flight equipment completely crazy. According to some, birds would be unable to fly over it, but in reality, there are birds, there are pigeons, and even helicopters. Here, in fact, it's the government that doesn't want it, to ensure the safety and tranquility of the believers. It's still more beautiful, a blue sky. The same goes for Machu Picchu in Peru, the Parthenon in Athens, or other similarly protected monuments. The fear here is that a plane might crash and destroy these monuments of humanity. Even Disneyland is a no-fly zone in the United States. Mickey can divert the path of planes. It's one of the few private establishments in the world that can do that. Here, we understand it's for safety, but sometimes the reason is more unusual. For example, still in the United States, it's forbidden to fly over the Prairie Chapel Ranch. You're probably wondering why you can't fly over a ranch in the middle of nowhere. A little information that will help you. This place was named from 2001 to 2009, the Western White House. In fact, it was one of the private residences of the president at the time, George W. Bush, who said, well, I want to be at peace at home, so no planes. I wouldn't mind either. Last part, why don't planes fly straight? We finally arrive at the question I asked myself at the beginning. Look at this Los Angeles-Tokyo route. Already, it breaks the misconception that planes wouldn't fly over the Pacific. Yes, they do it very well. Proof. But above all, this image makes me ask a question. Why make this strange curve? There are no Russian monuments or North Pole here. We can fly in a straight line then. Why don't we do it? Well, as you might guess, the problem is that your map is flat and the Earth is a sphere. If you take a world map and stretch a string between 2 points, the string will curve. The straight line becomes a curve. The curved line becomes the shortest path. In mathematics, this is called loxodromy and orthodromy. We don't realize how much our maps don't represent reality at all. Try it. Remove the paper around your globe and try to flatten it. There will be bulges everywhere, and you'll have to cut some parts. In the end, there are dozens of ways to represent a map flat, but it forces you to either cut oceans, remove continents, or completely distort reality. That's the case with the Mercator projection. The areas in the north and south become huge compared to what they really are. Europe, Russia, America are a very small land area, very close to each other. Ironic that the countries that consider themselves the center of the world are actually on its periphery. Friends, promise me next time you take a plane, pay attention to the trajectory you take. Ask yourself, why is my plane taking this route rather than another? You'll see, it's fun. And as you've seen, it allows you to learn a lot about history and science. Everything we love here. If you like the video, subscribe. For us, it's like a signal. Guys, keep going. And for you, it's the certainty of being notified when it comes out. Thanks to the whole team for giving their all all on this video. Still difficult to make. Come on, friends. Ciao.